What's up, everybody? Welcome back to this week's episode of the Vinecast. We are coming off a very windy weekend, very windy match. The banners, I believe, all blew off the wall before the game even kicked off. So we were really struggling, did not have enough tape to keep those secure, which is a little unfortunate. But unfortunately, it was a windy match, but was not a win for the Ivy. Get it?
Oh my God. I was not prepared for that.
That came to me just a moment ago, and I had to run with it. We saw our first, I wouldn't say it was uneventful, but it certainly wasn't the most exciting match we've ever watched at City Stadium. But every team needs to grind out a 0-0 draw at some point to be a real footballing institution. So, yeah, have they had a 0-0 draw before? Did we have one last season?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't think we did.
I rely on you for Ivy history, Kate. So if you do not know the answer, I also do not know the answer.
Because they only drew once last season.
Yeah.
So,
and I don't think it was 0-0. I really don't think any of these games ended 0-0.
Yeah. So I think this is the team's first 0. It's too bad we don't have thought mobs, so we can't really look these things up unless we've organized it all before. Our apologies. Somebody needs to build a thought mob for pre-professional women's sports. I guess that would be us, actually, since we're
That's our job.
So if anybody has software skills and wants to do that for us, please reach out, get in touch. It would make our lives a whole lot easier. So a little less excitement to talk about this week, but we'll start where we usually start, which was the starting 11. Oh, I didn't even mean to do that one, but that fell right into my lap. It's getting worse, folks. I'm really tired. And honestly, not much to talk about here either. Exactly the same as match day 1.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing from the starting 11 is that it's exactly the same as match day 1. Only because we talked a little bit in the first episode about what are we going to see from a rotation standpoint. Is it going to be like we're going to constantly give each keeper another start and sort of share starts and share minutes a lot? I think we already have our answer to that. We feel like we're going to start with the strongest 11 and kind of keep it that way. May change a little bit this week as we start to play 2 games a week, but I thought that was interesting insight into what our strategy might be to go through this season and how it might be a little bit different than last season.
Yeah, I think from a tactical and coach's perspective, when I would be coaching a team, not that I've coached the Ivy, but when I would be coaching a team, especially if I'm building it out from the ground up and I really haven't played with them a lot before, I really hadn't coached them a lot before. If I find a combination that works really well in the first game, I'm just going to be like, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's one of those things of let's try this out again because it really worked last time. And then we'll just see if it happens. And I think now what'll be really interesting is what does that look like on, Wednesday night when we see that, okay, that didn't work. Okay, so now kind of pushing it together, and then we'll talk about it in a bit with those kind of subs that came in and now feeling like, okay, of those subs who had the impact, how can I sort of rearrange them now? But I think, yeah, so we're past the phrase of kind of crossing our fingers and closing our eyes and kind of being like, I hope this works again. And now it's like, okay, now we're starting to get somewhere with how these girls actually play.
Yeah, agreed. And I feel like also with the Heat, we did see maybe a little legginess on the field as well, which also might, it's only going to get warmer, most likely. This was an earlier match than usual, but Richmond, the mid-Atlantic seaboard there's not going to be cooler days ahead. So if the legginess, hopefully they'll, build up their fitness a little bit, but that's an indication that maybe if the Heat and everything looking to be rotating a lot more or players not putting in as long of a shift as I think, was it the whole midfield played the full 90? No. So Sophie Stroud came in near the end. But.
Yeah.
Well, you got the Jill Flammia into the midfield to replace Issa, I think, and then Sophie to replace Jill later on in the game. That whole musical chairs of the 6th position.
Right. And that's a perfect transition because we did have some additional names on the bench. Ava Jung was actually here today. Her name was not just on the Instagram graphic, but she was actually physically in City Stadium. And we also had Sophie Stroud, which was exciting, and Jill Flammia. She's real, guys. She's a real player.
Yeah, we maybe we wait a little bit to sort of like diagnose Jill's full 20-minute cameo that we saw from her, but it was awesome to see. I was starting to wonder. I don't know if you guys have ever played Fantasy Premier League, but like if you have, you can only select so many players from one team to be on your like fantasy team. I'm wondering if the league will start to impose like how many Flammias can we have on the field at one time, and like what is that limit? And hopefully it does not exist.
Yeah. But although maybe the Ivy is imposing their own restriction because Molly unfortunately was not in the team today. They've kept the two.
So the cap is 2. The cap, we can only have 2.
Yeah, the Academy girls. It seems like there's more subs, so I guess we'll see. They definitely did that last season when the bench was very, very sparse. They brought the high schoolers, and they did that this first week. So I wonder if we'll see that again, or if there will be if that will be an honor bestowed on certain Academy players, regardless. Because at home, I mean, I don't know. Do they have like minimum rosters in this league on like kickers and stuff?
I would think not. Just based on the fact that one game where we just had a bunch of people coming in from a bus, and they were apparently on separate buses, and they had just played with who they were going to play with. So I think not, or maybe that's changed, but I think that's probably, I don't think we have the restriction.
So maybe we'll see all the children someday. So the only other notable thing that we found out in the press box beforehand was there was actually a familiar face in goal for Charlottesville, Ms. Keely Thomas, who unfortunately did not feature very much for the Ivy last season because, as her dad informed us in the Facebook group a little later on in the season, she got a concussion during her spring season right before the Ivy season started and was out until I think just the last 2 or 3 matches. So she made 1 appearance, and it was in the one game against Christos, I believe, that was not broadcast. There was no stream at all. So we quite literally have 0 footage of Keely Thomas playing for the Ivy. But dang, she seems like a really good keeper.
She played well.
Yeah, so that was tough. Kind of wish she was worse.
One other notable, I don't want to backpedal on my take, but the mint kits on the field, I liked them. I thought they looked very nice. I still think I'm keeping my ordering the same way. However, I did like them. I thought they looked good.
They contrasted nicely with the grass, I thought.
Yes, very pretty.
All right, so we'll get into what everyone's been waiting for, the actual match. They played a game. They took a lot of shots.
They sure did. We sure paid for a game to be played with players out there.
I would venture to say one of the more exciting 0-0 draws out there. I mean, like, I think your stat total, Kate, said like 26. Like we were attacking a lot. We just didn't score. And I think we talked about this a little bit last week as sort of like a fear of what we saw in the first half last week and kind of bleeding into the second half a little bit about like, are we going to be the team that creates a billion chances and doesn't finish them? And there were a ton of factors as to why maybe that was on Saturday, but it kind of happened to us a little bit where we just created, and we just couldn't find the end product. And that's a bummer, but at least for the crowd's sake, we got to see a lot of attacking football, which is nice.
Agreed. I will say, I think maybe one of the bigger differences from last week is, again, I'm not an XG person, but I think these were lower XG shots. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like a lot of the shots on target were like in the mixer. Like I think there were only 1 or 2 like truly quality shots on target. Taylor Berry, header queen. She got a couple of headers on the ball on target. Sarah Flammia, I think, had 1 in the second half. But a lot of them were off target, very off target, or deflected out way before they got anywhere near the goal. Like Thomas made saves. I wasn't actually tracking her saves, but a lot more were well off target and deflected out by defenders than they were meaningfully saved by the keeper.
Yeah, and
go ahead.
sorry,
Go ahead.
you go.
Okay, I agreed. Like, but I think we had 3 or 4 like very, very meaningful opportunities. Like you said, Sarah had one. Gianna Trappick had the later posted on Instagram play of the game where we almost scored, and it was kind of like, oh, that's the play of the game, and that kind of tells you like the story of the game. Fitzgerald, I think, had a really good look in the center of the box once, and I think Olivia might have had a good look too. But yeah, generally a lot of volume, a little bit lower quality. But yeah, curious what you thought, Allan.
I think that from the perspective that I was looking at, like there was a lot of the really close ones were what I would like to ascribe as an F it, we ball kind of thing going on, where you see it, you have an opening, not a great one, an opening, fire one, see where it goes. And a lot of the time, like you're just, even in the crowd, you're kind of looking at that like, oh, it's nothing. And then it gets a lot closer than you think. And maybe that was the intention, maybe it wasn't, but it just kind of floats in a certain way and it kind of gets it. There were like 2 or 3, I remember, that bounced like right off the top of the crossbar that came in from shots pretty much out of nowhere a lot of the time. Like it just kind of seemed like they were either an errant, maybe cross, or they were something else or whatever, but they just kind of came out and were like a lot closer. And obviously that's going to be something the goalkeeper is not going to be as prepared for. But I think that, yeah, I'm basically beating the same point, but we took a lot of chances, but not necessarily to the clinical level that maybe we even saw in the first game, where it seemed like they were really intentionally going for certain accuracy and certain shot quality. But yeah, that's just me.
Also, Tucker, I think, only had 1 shot all game. She had, Lord, I don't even know. If I go back to my other stats, she had 4 shots in the first match, and then she had 1 not on target in this one. So she also was not, I don't know. I guess they could have watched it. I don't know what level of scouting these coaches are doing ahead of these matches. But I guess they could have scouted the fact that she was the source of a lot of really good production and made shutting her down part of their game plan, because she was almost invisible for most of the match. She just wasn't getting on the ball. She wasn't dropping as deep for a lot of the match, which she had a lot of joy when she like picked the ball up closer to the half-field line and actually took her defender on. So yeah, that could have been a contributing factor. If you mark her out of the game, you lose a lot of your creativity.
Yeah, I think the one thing I will say about our wingers, I think first of all, I think there's a lot to unpack about like maybe why we didn't score. But the one positive, I think, or one of the positives that you can take away from our wingers, our midfielders, literally our attacking players, they are a menace on the press. Like in instances where they're not getting as involved, like balls aren't being played out to them quite as much, they do a really good job of sort of like creating their own offense by taking the ball away on the press, and that sort of starts our break, which I think is really interesting. But yeah, I think that we did a lot more of crossing the ball from the outside this game than we did from, like we talked about last week, I think, like the inverted winger play of like cut the ball back in and shoot it. Taylor Berry did that a couple times. We didn't see that quite as much from everybody else. And the crosses are an interesting one, because you mentioned, Kate, like Taylor Berry's head is exceptional. Like she's a really good at going and attacking the ball in the box with her head. But beyond that, like we don't attack the ball like as well, or we haven't seen it as much in the first 2 games. I think Saturday night was like very windy, very hard to read crosses, I'm sure. But I felt like we were putting in decent service and really struggling to get on the end of it.
There was also, I think, so Alex and I were in the press box for the first half, where they trap you when you're on a press pass. But one of the things that you could really tell from up high, I bet you could tell from the lower level as well. Charlottesville was definitely across the field quite tall. Like their players were pretty tall, like athletic, which sometimes in the women's game, and honestly, like that was a big problem for the Ivy last season, was like it seemed like the average height was like 5'6", and that's just, you know, when you're doing sort of a man-to-man comparison, that's not a great matchup. So I was pretty impressed at how athletic pretty much the whole Charlottesville team looked. I think that was a little less true with the starting 11 that Virginia Beach had, where they definitely had a little less height across their team. They had some players who were very tall, but then some who were not. So that does not put you at an advantage in the box. Cam was in the box, obviously, for all the headers, and Woodson is also quite tall, but that's definitely an area where the Ivy are not gifted, is in the height department.
We come up a little short.
There we go.
That's
there
three.
We go.
Pack them in. Allan, you're next.
Nope. Gonna have to kill me first.
To that level. Not sinking to that level.
So that definitely couldn't help. Unpredictable balls, and also they had a pretty tall back line, and that's not something you can really tactic your way out of when it's a 1-to-1.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I also think it's figuring out this league and figuring out a lot of these teams. And even though Charlottesville was a team we played last year, the thing about the W League is that this is a league that changes so often. The turnaround that you have is not the same as we have in other types of leagues. That's across pre-professional regardless. Men's and women's. USL 2 has the same problem. Things like that. We're going to see some differences. But yeah, I mean, we have a different crop. I would assume that a different crop of players than we were seeing from last game or from last season. And so I would wager if I went back and watched a Charlottesville match from last season and this season, they might have a completely different setup. They might have completely different players. They might have this whole thing. So again, we're just kind of figuring everything out. And I think that once we start to see something like once we have gotten Virginia Beach, or we've gotten Virginia Beach, obviously, but once we get Norfolk, is it Atlantic? Is that the term? The Atlantic?
Virginia Atlantic. It's so confusing.
So confusing. It's even more confusing because the men's team has the exact same logo, but a different name, which makes it so much worse.
Oh my God.
So great. Everything is fine. And then it's Annapolis, right? And then is there anybody else in this league? Is that
no?
It? Yeah.
That's weirdly feels like we're leaving somebody out, but we're not.
We're not. But yeah, once we kind of have that, I feel like we'll kind of figure it out a little bit more and the growing pains will stop. But I think it's like a 0-0 draw, like we said, kind of beginning, like a 0-0 draw is something we expected probably, or a something draw was something, maybe not 0-0, but a draw was something that we expected to be at some point. And guess what? Actually, I think it's low-key kind of great that we have the competitiveness in a league like this, that we're not like blowing every team out of the water or we're getting blown out or whatever is happening. And it's like super sliding scales, that we have enough competitive edge from our team and from a team in Charlottesville that we're both competing at that level at the same time, same place, same pace, that we can have something like that. So counterpoint, 0-0 draws are good.
It's bad for player development. You're right. If
there we go.
Players to be better, they have to play in more competitive matches. Yeah, I get it. I don't like it though.
Yeah.
Before we get too deep, a question for you guys, I guess. Was there anything that stood out to you guys that you feel like we could have, other than like put ball in back of net? Like, was there anything tactically or otherwise that stood out to you guys around like that we could have changed, that we could have done better in order to sort of break that 0-0 draw and get on the board? Or was there anything that Charlottesville did that you were like, oh yeah, that works, that will work well against us given our sort of like makeup? I'll go first since I posed the question, and so that I'll give you guys a second to think about it. So one big one is their keeper got pretty involved in sort of like a sweeper keeper type play. Last week, the way that we sort of broke the deadlock was that ball. They were playing a relatively high line, the ball in behind from Cam into Sania Tucker. That's how we score. There were 3 or 4 times, not just in the first half, but in the second as well, where Cam looked for that same ball. And one, it was a little bit more difficult Saturday because of the wind. So he was either carrying way further because the wind was at her back, or it was sort of like dying on her. But in the instances where the ball was going a little further, their keeper was really active off her line, and she would sort of come up and play like a sweeper and put the ball out. I think that hurt us a little bit. And then the other thing is, like, it was really interesting to me in the post game, talking to Owusu, which, first of all, shout out Owusu. He said he listens to the show or watches the show or whatever, which I thought was pretty cool. And we promised that we would be nice. Not that we were going to say anything mean to begin with, but it was really interesting to me. He was extremely positive with basically, like, we did what we wanted to do. We wanted to play in the wide areas, put our wingers on 1v1s, and that's absolutely fair. We have incredibly talented wingers, I think. But like, just a strange sort of feeling after the game to hear when you didn't score, to say we did what we wanted to do in the attack. And so curious how he did mention, like, it's on us, the coaches, to help you get the ball into the back of the net. So I'm not sure if that's like shooting practice or like what changes from the game on Saturday to the game on Wednesday to sort of help us get on the board. But really curious to see, sort of like, it may be worth asking him next time we talk to him, like, what are those things that we're working on that you can do as a coaching staff to get the ball in the back of the net?
I'd say one thing that stood out that we hadn't seen last week that we did see this week was the back line was put under a bit more pressure. Charlottesville actually had, according to my calculations, only in the first half, they had 1 shot on target, 3 total shots. So the shot on target was not actually particularly vicious. So Lauren just kind of collected it, just caught it in the middle of the 6. So she wasn't under a huge amount of pressure, but they actually took more shots earlier in the match than Virginia Beach did last week. But it definitely felt like they, from the beginning, were looking to catch the center backs on the break. They had like 1 target striker who was tall, fast. She kind of looked like if Macy Landell was like taller and like, yeah, taller and played centrally. And she was giving them a tough time. They were getting the ball to her pretty well. Their balls over the top were a little less arcing. They were a little bit stronger and more direct. And it worked to the extent in that Pustover and Simmons were having to clean up and we're having to get back and catch her on the chase. They handled it well enough. They didn't score, but if you have a attacking line that maybe has more reinforcements, we might actually have been in trouble. But their long balls were just a little more purposeful, and their target player was quite competent in her ability to control them and create a chance out of that, which our press is better. Our press is more consistent, and there's usually more players on the break. But no, she looked like she was about to be dangerous. And I don't know if that's Woodson playing as a little more of a target player rather than dropping. Sometimes the fluidity means that Barry just doesn't have the pace that Woodson does, or the height, especially when you're up against center backs. Barry is an extremely competent player and has pushed her way out of situations like that on multiple occasions. But there is something to a player who's tall and strong and pacey, who's able to be that target player when you're looking to play on the break. So I don't know, a little bit of a rambling thought, but that they handled her well enough, but that was definitely something tricky that I almost wish we'd had done a little more often.
Yeah, and I think for me, the stuff that I saw, like, you guys have kind of covered it pretty decently. The only thing I can kind of add is is when we get into the opposing box, when we get into there, some of our decision making slowed to a degree that enabled them to kind of start rallying the defenses and get a little bit closer to us and put us under a little bit more pressure. And we just weren't, it's not even that we weren't seeing the attacking players there or that they weren't trying, like they weren't trying to get in those positions. But the decision making, some of the time kind of felt like it was, let's always go to this side, because it sort of felt almost unconscious that we kind of go to one side where we're successful through this, let's do that. Or it didn't feel as, I don't know. There was a lot more purposeful passing I saw in the last game where we're quicker build up, bam, bam, 1-2 touch passing in, somebody makes a run, good, in on goal, shot, and it's a shot or it's a goal or it's whatever. But in this one, it just kind of felt like, what do I do? Okay, 3 defenders right now on me, pass back, do this. Okay, we're back in the block. I don't see anybody. Let me pass it back, pass. And it wasn't feeling like we were getting into those really good attacking scenarios that we were last time, pretty much because we had just sort of slowed down a bit, even though we go so fast in getting there, and then we slow it down a little bit too much. And that was basically the only thing, the addition that I saw for that. But that, like I said, that's something that goes game by game, and especially with the type of height that those players have, some of it was just physical. But I would say that maybe, like, again, and that's a classic thing of, you know, girls getting a low block and things like that at some point. It's how do you work that? So yeah,
the decision making point particularly is a super interesting one, because as I was watching, we talked, I think Allan, honestly, earlier you talked a little bit about, like, or maybe it was Kate, like taking shots that like maybe weren't on, but we were just like, we hadn't gotten a sniff of goal in a while, or we were playing a lot of crosses, and so people just started like kind of taking rips. I don't know if it was out of frustration or like what it was.
Or hoping they were going to get another goal like Taylor Bayer last week.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if it's like, I was sitting there because it's like, I don't ever want to tell my like forwards especially not to shoot, because that's why they're forwards. Like, you want them to have that sort of like goal scoring instinct and like have a nose for goal and want to be putting the ball on frame. But every once in a while, like the square ball is on to somebody in the center of the box, or like carry the ball into like a little bit more space and maybe don't shoot so deep. I don't know. It's decision making. It's exactly what you said, Allan. And so like, it'll be interesting to see how that changes over the next few weeks, because like I said, I don't think Owusu or anyone will ever tell those players don't shoot the ball, because you're a forward, like you're a striker, you're a goal scorer. I'd much rather you be doing that than be like timid to shoot. But is that extra pass available? Is there more space to carry into to get a better look? Like, what does that look like? And can we maybe improve upon it a little bit? I don't know. It'll be interesting.
Agreed. We've already talked about both halves, but in the 65th minute is when the Ivy made their first big batch of substitutes, which was a little later. So Tucker got about 10 more minutes this match than she did last week, but then a couple players got less time than they did last week. So in the 65th minute, we had our requisite keeper change. We hadn't seen one of those yet. So Marks came in for Hargrove. Flammia came in for Elivara. Annabelle Sharrer came in, and Macy Landell came in for Sydney. So similar subs that we saw last week. To a certain extent, one in the midfield, one in the back line, and one on the wing. Thoughts on these? I think the big storyline is actually getting to see Jill play, and shocker, she's a very good player.
Yeah, I also think, and like I definitely want to talk about Jill, but while I'm thinking about it, I don't want to forget. We'd be remiss if we didn't shout out Annabelle Sharrer for getting called up to the U16 U.S. women's national team. Crazy, like what an accomplishment. We talked about her last week. We felt like she kind of looked the part for being as young as she is. I also wonder, again, there's probably no USL W stats on this, because there's very few of them anywhere that we can find. But Cher subbed in for Shea Darty, who was like a 15, 16-year-olds subbing in for like our oldest player. She graduated in 2019. I think we deduced
Yes.
last time. So that's what, like a
So yeah,
10...
I took a gap year, but I would have graduated 2019 and I turned 28 in June. So she's the
Yeah,
likelihood.
so that's like a 12-year age gap, which, like, when you're talking about like the NWSL or something, that's not that huge, because it's usually like, you know, you've got your token teen or two, and then you've got like people towards the end of their career. But I feel like in a league that is predominantly college players, or like people who are around the same like 4 or 5 years of age, that's got to be a record, or we've got to be getting close to the record of like the sub with the highest age difference
the
coming
experience gap
on.
too.
Yeah, exactly. So but also just like Annabelle Sharrer being that young and being like a 65th minute sub in a 0-0 game, and like really being used, I think, as like she created some opportunities, like she looked good.
Shots.
Yeah, and I think that just speaks a lot to like who she's going to be as a player, who she already is. Don't want to take credit away from her there, but like really, really impressed with her. Yeah, and then obviously Jill as well, which, Allan, if you want to talk about a little bit what you saw from Jill, maybe.
Yeah, no, I was really impressed. That's one of those kinds of subs that it feels like the pH kind of changes a little bit when they come on. One, because it just seemed like she was desperate to get on, which she would be in that kind of position, but just because she added so much almost instantaneously, kind of started going a little bit more forward, taking that ball into those scenarios, and you saw it like within that minute, within the 65th minute crossover, and we started getting her more involved into the game. You started to feel that shift happen where we're starting to get in a lot more. We're starting to kind of get a little bit more, you know, with that attacking power. It feels like a goal was maybe coming. It didn't, which was unfortunate, but it felt like it, which is half the battle. And yeah, I mean, there was I'd basically be rambling at this point just to say that she's great. She's great. She's really good at her job. But it is one of those things that I'm very eager to see her play more, and to see if maybe she gets on the starting 11 and we see her in a more consistent role for like a more consistent amount of time. Because with the sub, it is different. Like I've played with people, I've seen things, I've done whatever in subs that are like really great players coming on as a sub. Okay, kind of players coming on as it. Not saying she's just okay. She's probably amazing still, but also it is a different situation. Like when you're coming on as a sub, you're coming on to do instant action, and everything is kind of fast forwarded about 5 times speed. I want to see what happens when she can kind of start to control a midfield more, because she's definitely capable of that. Like, does she kind of change the way that we play? Was this more of a play style just because she knew we needed a goal and we needed to get up there and need to do whatever? Or is she the type of player that's going to cause us to go forward at the very beginning of a match? So I think a lot of it was just hypothetical, because she was good. She was really good. And it was a really impressive performance from that moment on. But I think that for me, looking at her and looking how much potential she has, I want to see that from a starting position. And then how does that affect us for an entire game?
Agreed. Yes,
Totally.
she is our other player who's been involved in the youth national team setup, although her injury last year clearly has had a long impact on her game. Rob told us in the press box that her minutes were being very, very heavily managed, that we would only expect to see her for about 15 or 20 minutes. But I don't think any of us thought that was actually going to be inside the half, that she was going to be subbed out. Which was a bit of an interesting choice on such a hot day to basically use 2 substitutions. Again, I don't know if they're super strict about the number of changes you can make, if there even is a limit, so maybe there isn't at all. But yeah, you weren't crazy. She did go in, and then there was the same number on the board. That was not a collective hallucination. And that was the plan from what Rob told us, which is a bit disappointing because, again, it being such a short season, there isn't a ton of time to, get a player fully match fit over the course of like a month. So it would be a bit disappointing if she is heavily limited in her appearances. Does that mean she won't travel to away games, things like that? So, but yeah, the caliber of player who is called into a national team camp at any level and the rest of the players it is wild how different, how immediately you can tell. Her touch is just so controlled. Like the way her center of gravity, the way she's able to like move her body, and it's like the players around her just like moved away like like water around a rock. Like, I mean, she's like, I want to see more of her, but you can tell when Rob said, if you think Sarah's good, like wait till you see your sister, because she really did kind of have, ideally Sarah would progress on the same timeline that, you know, give Sarah another year or two playing at the high level at UVA, that she'd continue to develop and look as good. But it's just that it looks so natural and it looks so easy. It's not, it's so hard, because if it was easy, every player would do it and they would look that good. But just this like astonishing silkiness, like on the ball with her the movement of her body, and just how quickly she turns, how quickly how aggressive her first touch is, how she immediately takes it out of danger. It's just like all these things that it's very hard, but you have it or you don't to a certain extent. And luckily her sister does have it as well. So got two.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too, is like not to discount Sarah's performance at all, because I think we all agree. I think Allan referred to it as a hot knife cutting through butter last week when Sarah kind of gets on the ball in the midfield. So, yeah, I mean, they're both extremely exciting to watch sort of centrally and see what they can create. So,
yes, I think I wrote both of them at one point. Sarah Flammia, very good. Jill Flammia, very good. Different gravy is definitely in here a couple times. Same with Woodson. I mean, Woodson is just like, she is everything that you want a forward. And it's when she's actually like in a good position, it's so exciting to see a player who's just that confident and good. Confident in her abilities, because her ability really is that good.
Yeah. Two quick things I wanted to, one a statement of anger, another a question for you guys. The first being the statement of anger: who's controlling stoppage time? Why did we have hydration breaks in both halves and multiple injuries and all these substitutions, particularly in the second half? And we got 3 minutes of stoppage time in the first half and 5 minutes of stoppage time in the second half. I thought that was pretty criminal, especially in a game that was tied and we were pushing. It did feel a little bit like we could have played for 3 days and maybe not put the ball in the back of the net, just like with some of the luck that we were having. But just generally, I'm angry about that, and I want everybody to know. The question for you guys is, I think Gianna Trepik got Woman of the Match. I think she played extremely well. This is not to take anything away from her, but who are you guys? Because it's easy when there's a goal scorer, or like when your keeper makes an amazing save. In a game like this, it's a little bit more difficult to decide. Did you guys have somebody who you felt like was your Woman of the Match?
I would say, I mean, the thing is, I think she did do like arguably one of the more consistent performances of the match. Like I could say somebody else, but if I'm just looking at it from who did I see on the field that was doing a consistent job in their space and doing the best possible job in that space at that time, I think that's probably still who I would have picked. Even though like I have my personal passions and personal, like when they get on the ball, I'm like, yeah, like again, my Flammia craze. Like I'll still, when she gets on and whatever, but I think if I'm just saying consistency, because no goals were scored, no assists were made, no whatevers. Yeah, I think that she earned that. I think that, you know, of the players that were out there, I think she did the most consistent job.
Totally. Yeah, she played really well.
Yeah, I really liked, and we talked to her in the post-game press conference as well. Apologies to everyone, those aren't up, because I meant to listen to it again and forgot, because the wind was really bad and we did not have a lapel mic, so the speaker was like right into the wind, so I'm very worried that our audio is not very good. The Ivy should have posted. It's all the same stuff. It's just would be on our brand, so you can listen to it on their YouTube as well, because they actually have a real microphone, so shouldn't have been affected by all the background noise that inevitably happens at a very busy city stadium after a match ends. And she said that she is very much a player who has played in lots of different positions. She's played at outside back, she's played at center back, she's played in the midfield, to kind of wherever her coach needs her. They say, hey, I want to try here. And she says, sure, because the more positions you play, the higher likelihood you have of getting in a team and getting consistent minutes. So she seems to have a pragmatic mindset towards her positioning. The more sort of skills she has in her toolbox, the more useful she is to her coaches. So after seeing her play outside back and in the midfield last week, I think she got a shot off when she was in the midfield. But she had at least one shot. It wasn't on target. It was on target.
It got saved.
Yeah, it was like a cross, upper 90. Definitely looked probably originally a cross picked up by the wind, but
it's a shot. Give her the shot. It's a shot.
It would have been
exactly what she wanted to do. Yeah.
Yeah. If it had gone in, it would have been an absolute golazo. So we were robbed a little bit. The only other player I think who put up a lot of good numbers was Taylor Berry. Again,
that was my argument. Yeah.
Yeah, she had 6 shots, 2 on target. And shots is a little bit misleading because at least 3 or 4 of those were headers. So she is a very good player, as mentioned earlier of the year.
But I also think like that is something that she provides that we just have. And I'm not saying that other people cannot provide that, but we just haven't seen it from other people quite as much yet. And so it's like that is a unique skill set that she brings that we haven't seen the fruits of it yet because we haven't scored off a header yet. But it's going to happen. And yeah, I think she played really, really well as well. I'm not saying that I think Gianna Trappick probably is the woman of the match, and I think I agree with that. But honorable mention. I think it's weird to say like our center forward is the woman of the match when we drew 0-0. But I think honorable mention for Taylor Berry for just kind of like doing things. Her hold up play is also really good a lot of times. She takes the ball out of the air pretty well. Just like generally, I think she does things that are sort of a unique skill set to her that we're still building elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah, the only other notable thing we mentioned it, but Annabelle Sharrer did have one very good shot after she came in the 74th minute. She dribbled it into the box and hit it just over, and all of us in the press box had our head in our hands. The storyline was screaming out to us how beautiful and perfect that would have been, but the wait goes on for her first game. But yeah, again, congratulations to her. That is a huge, huge achievement to be called up to the national team at any level. And unfortunately, it is a May camp, so that means she might be taken out of our setup for that camp, which is the downside of having players in any national team setup. Simmons, I think, will be among them later at some point this season as well, which is a bit disappointing now that she's rather indispensable at center back. But I guess Isa Elivaro will have to be deputized again. Any other sort of grab bag thoughts from the match that we haven't touched on? I have one.
You go for it with yours because all of mine is sort of like related to the stream and or like old man yells at cloud type thing. So I want you to go.
Honestly similar, but attendance was announced. 4,600 folks came to our Ivy match. A bit of a drop off visually didn't look like a huge drop off from last week, so maybe there's something to see with the counting. But still a huge amount of people. That's pretty much on par, larger than Kickers crowd this season. Again, bigger than half the teams in USL 1 this season. So even when the drop off is over 1,000 people, we're still outdrawing many teams in professional leagues. So really cool to see, especially on such a hot day, a little earlier. Mannion was saying that the 5 o'clock kickoff was a concession to folks with very little kids because it'll wrap up before bedtime for littler kids.
Interesting.
So that's kind of that was the thought process between having one a little earlier in the day, not 2 p.m. last season that had like multiple people have to have heat stroke and ambulances called. Horrific scenes. But that was sort of the thought process, was that was a little bit more accessible for families with young kids. So I don't know, maybe 1,500 of them should have showed up, and then we would have had another sellout because there was clearly a drop off. And if that was time or temperature related, I guess we'll never know.
I like you said though, I will very much applaud the 4,600 people who were there because it felt like a sellout, like from when we were getting forward. Now that we didn't have a ton to cheer about, but like when we were getting forward, the crowd was definitely involved. they were ready to explode. If we could have just, helped, but that's okay. Okay, really quick, we'd be remiss if we did not shout out the stream for showing Allan. I went back and watched sort of the game again on the stream, and in stoppage time, I just encourage everybody to go check it out. It's in stoppage time for like a full 20 seconds. We see our beloved Allan doing a little jig here and there, just being at a game on a Saturday night, and it is fantastic. I wish we could have seen Allan celebrate a goal, but instead we saw Allan dancing a little bit while the girl was cramping basically on the field. We cut to Allan for a good 20 seconds to sort of entertain us, I guess.
I'm there to vibe. I'm the court jester of the Richmond Ivy, in which if you need a break, just cut to me. I also, for those curious, did the hardline journalism to figure out where you can find me. And if you take your sports tension players to 2 minutes, 33 seconds, and about 45 milliseconds, you will find your boy just sort of vibing out to nothing for approximately, Alex got it, like 20 straight seconds.
It was so good, though.
And what I really love is you can tell the moment I give up on it, because I start doing my little dance, and then I just kind of like stop. And then I just keep looking, and I see that she's still on the field, and they go, "Oh, she's still on the field." And then I just kind of do one of these numbers and just put my head down, and that's when they cut away. So, yeah.
So it's 2.5 minutes into second half stoppage time. Is that what you said?
It's about that. Yeah. If you want to get in on just like the hardline math of that one, that's probably it. But yeah, my hot tip is get on camera
was
for
it?
dancing.
Was it the far away camera or the close up camera?
They zoomed right in, baby.
Zoomed right in. It was pretty close. Pretty close.
It was kind of like on like Knicks games or whatever, they show like Celebrity Row. I think that they knew what they were doing. I think they were like, wait a minute, this is co-host of Vinecast, Allan.
That's courtside.
We gotta get this guy on the TV.
Courtside,
courtside, baby. That's
deal.
what you get.
So encourage everybody to check that out. He's a superstar. Great dance moves.
If I was really competent, I would have had the clip up. I would have shared my screen, because podcasts are a visual medium, but we do not.
Okay.
So use your imaginations until you go on YouTube.
The other thing, and this is just to preface, I want to say, like, I am so glad that we have a stream to watch, that we have like a media team that does highlights packages, that we have all these post-game interviews and things. And this is going to, like I said, sound very old man yells at cloud, but I just would love to have a conversation with and hear their side of. We have a 5-minute highlight video on the Richmond Ivy page for the game on Saturday, and the first like 40% of the video is like pregame warm-ups and crowd, and we love that because sometimes we get Allan, but other times, like if I am tuning into the highlights to see the highlights of the game, like probably, I guess, just like if I'm watching NWSL highlights, I get sort of like extended play highlights of the game. Maybe it's something we think about. I don't know. Like I enjoy the play. I also get the, like, people might be able to see themselves on the highlights video after, and so like you want the crowd to go home and look up the highlights video to see themselves. But maybe we call that something else. Maybe we make 2 videos. We're like crowd highlights and then like footy highlights.
Right.
Just something to think about. I know I'm old and grumpy, but
yeah. And we're there for the soccer. Maybe not everyone is. Maybe.
No, it's super fair.
Maybe other people are there for what we heard was a extremely canceled gun spinning exhibition at halftime that was heavily nixed.
We're getting into a whole nother thing. Allan was not in the press box for this, but just like TLDR, the Navy that got honored at the beginning of the game was supposed to do a rifle twirling thing at halftime. It was too windy for them. There was some debate about whether or not they were going to be able to do it. They did not do it. That's all it was. That's all the
exciting stuff that if you get on a press pass, the conversations you get to overhear. And we got to see them walk very dejectedly back to their cars and put their guns back in there.
It was weird to see Navy men get in cars. I thought they were on a boat.
They don't go home.
I expected them to go home in a boat.
Yeah. Any other general thoughts or post-match interview thoughts?
No, the only thing is you asked a good question about Cam's positional evolving. And she sort of talked about a forward at Tennessee. When she transferred to Florida State, they kind of moved her to right back, which eventually transitioned to center back. And so we finally got the whole story on why Cam was a forward last year for us as a center back this year, which was interesting.
Yeah, check that out. Though she did say she is being used as a forward in the Jamaica setup, which Bunny Shaw should be very, very scared.
We coming.
Cam Simmons is coming for you. All right, so we'll just quickly preview. We've got 2 matches this week, so it's our first double match week of the year. Match on Wednesday against, bear with me, Virginia Beach United. So we're already playing them again. And then Saturday against Virginia Atlantic, which is in Norfolk.
Which is different.
Very different.
Yeah. Although it's weird because having just come from that area briefly, I think I could be wrong on this one. They play pretty close together. The Hampton Roads area, to be fair, is very close and very amorphous, and it's kind of what it is. But they don't. It's weird. It's like the delineation between like where they are is kind of whack to me. I think it's great to get, because I will say this. We lived in Norfolk, and that's kind of like the city center. Like there's a Virginia Beach city. There's kind of, not really. I'm about to make a lot of Virginia Beach people mad, but guess what? Get on your Virginia Beach United podcast. Take that out of here.
Yeah, get out.
Richmond and Ivy, RBA. Anyway, yeah. So the city center of Norfolk. I talked about it on our first pod about like the level of especially women's soccer at that just in Hampton Roads is crazy and it's really prolific. But also like the street soccer scene in Norfolk is huge and it's a really big scene and it's really cool. So I'd be interested to see if that's kind of something that collides within each other. And you know what? It did, because if you look at the Virginia Beach versus Virginia Athletic, that does look like a street soccer score.
Atlantic even.
Yeah, Atlantic, because they lost 7-1, which is nuts.
Yeah, it's an Ivy score from last season.
Yeah. So how are we feeling about that? Because obviously we beat Virginia Beach, ergo property times that by 3, right? Is that how much we're going to beat them by? Is that how math works?
Sure. So yeah. I guess like the one thing that I was talking, I can't remember if we were talking about this before the show. I am a little bit nervous about Virginia Beach because when I saw their starting 11 graphic for that game, it looked very different than the starting 11 graphic for our game. So I wonder if we maybe didn't get, like if it was a graduation weekend or like for some reason we didn't get their best 11 and they are just like a lot better than what we saw last weekend. I hope they're not.
Yeah.
But I guess only time will tell.
Yeah. I think we can safely assume that Virginia Atlantic is pretty bad because
but they're trying their best and we're all out here for positivity.
Right. So like I think that is the one thing we can take away, that the likelihood that team becomes so much better that's
shots fired and we play them this week. We really need to win.
I know.
After Kate has just called them bad. Oh God.
That's a pretty. The only team we beat that badly last season was Patuxent. So if there are similarities in organization, setup, structure, we have concerns. And if there's not, then that's almost worse because at least Patuxent only had 8 players. So if they were, that was their full strength 11 and they lost that much, we're all trying our best. But for Virginia Beach, I do wonder, because I did a deep dive. I didn't take any notes or anything, but I scrolled the Instagrams last week of most of the teams that were playing, and Charlottesville, similar to Richmond in that most of the players are playing for local schools or are from the area. A lot of them seem to be from Richmond. They play with Richmond United. They know a lot of the girls from the Ivy, all played for RU. But Virginia, Hampton Roads teams seemed to be very randomly recruiting players who were not current college players, a lot of international players, a lot of players who go to universities not in Virginia and who also do not seem to be connected to Virginia. They have local players, they have a couple, but nowhere near the sort of specific local recruiting that Charlottesville and the Ivy have done. So it is a little interesting because, yeah, that means that graduations, and if everybody's traveling in from their schools, they're not just living in the area like most of the Richmond girls who could have just come home and stayed with their parents for the weekend, even if they were still at school. So personnel-wise, yeah, we could be looking at a pretty different team on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Hopefully not. Hopefully Virginia Atlantic is just really, really bad. And
the whole like recruiting from a specific area and like Richmond players is really interesting because I think we all just, that is like a logistics thing, right? Like you're from here, you're living here, you play for here. But I thought Owusu's comments in the post game were really interesting. Like it was a lot about like the Ivy, or he feels that he himself and like the Ivy as an organization like owe it to the community. And at first I thought he was just talking about owe it to the community of fans. Like we're all a community of Richmonders and of are we Richmonders? What do we call ourselves? And of fans and like whatever. But he also was talking about like to the local players. Like he was talking about like we owe it to the local player base to call up Richmond United girls and try to get them ready for the next level, which I think we assume that the next level is college, to get our current college players ready for the next season in the fall and that kind of stuff. So the sort of the purpose behind what we're doing and sort of the contrast between some of these places if they are recruiting from like wherever, it's really interesting. That feels almost built into Owusu's, like, to use like a marketing term, like mission statement of like I want to help what's around here, like what's local to us, and I think that's really interesting.
mm-hmm.
Cool. Okay, you want to do with our last couple minutes here, you want to do a start bench cut for the week?
Yeah.
Cool.
Right.
Okay, so start bench cut for the week, we are going to do Richmond Ivy game times. So in the first 3 games, we've gotten a taste of basically the 3 different windows that we will play in throughout the year. The first being a Saturday night game, like a 7:30 start. The second being a Saturday afternoon game, we'll call it. We have a 4:30 and a 5. And then the third being like the Wednesday. I think we have a Thursday game too. So we'll call it like a weekday game. So start bench cut, Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, weekday game.
Okay. I think the only reason I am going to have a unique perspective as someone on a press pass for a lot of these games in that my cut is a weeknight. Fair enough. My bench is actually going to be the Saturday night. And my start is going to be the earlier because I still got to have a whole fun night after the Ivy game.
True.
Because it didn't end so late that I was wildly behind. So we had some delicious Jell-O shots at the tailgate and then at the post tailgate as well. So I got to have one of those. They were a little melty, but that's okay. And it was nice as someone who follows the rules on my press pass to still have some fun after the match. And it wasn't too late at night and I wasn't super, super tired already. So
yeah, the pregame Jell-O shots just being a cup of Jell-O was like pretty funny. like they were like kid-friendly Jell-O shots that were literally just Jell-O, and I was like, that's amazing.
Yes, I had a cup of Jell-O before the game, and then I had a real Jell-O shot after.
Okay, so you are cutting weeknight then?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, fair. Allan, thoughts?
Okay, I'm gonna be weird. But not really, because when it comes down to it, it's gonna be kind of understandable. But I would say from my perspective, partially getting through the week as an educator is tough. A weeknight is actually kind of it's getting me through a little bit. So I don't know.
Slaps, yeah.
It kind of is okay because I get something to look forward to because I can't always do hangouts. I can't always do whatever, but like I can make room for soccer. I can do that. That's an event. I can make room in my heart and my week planner for that. But I will say, because I love it. I love a Saturday night or Friday night or whatever. So I'm obviously going to start. For me, I'm going to start Saturday night because that's just that is prime time for me. I love that. I would say I'm going to bench weeknights, which is, like I said, I get through the week. It's sometimes is pretty good. I'm actually kind of looking forward to the one we got on March 28th. It's probably gonna be pretty fun. And then Saturday afternoon. Now I have big beef with the afternoon slot because of what it did to my wife last season, which is that she got way too overheated during the game. She's a very athletic, very, very physical doctor lady. She drinks a lot of water. She does all the things right. And she was like, she turned to me and she was like, honey, it's too much. And I was like, I was also dying, to be fair, and trying to put on a brave face, but my melty body also agreed with that. And we had to leave, which is my worst case scenario for any soccer game, is that I have to leave before it's over. So that made me a little mad. I do like how I still have a night after that at some points, but I will say that one experience may have ruined it for me slightly. So
yeah, you don't have a night when you're dehydrated and comatose
or
and
dead.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. This was a tough one for me because they all have, like, I think very obvious pros and very obvious cons for me. So I don't want to be the loser who cuts Saturday night, but like I'm getting old and I just I'm putting that out there and I'm saying when we get done, especially on like Media Pass, when we get done with a game and it's 9:00 when the game ends, and then like I don't know, 10:30 by the time like we get home, like let's get you to bed, grandpa, kind of a thing. So I actually am that loser and I'm going to cut Saturday nights. I am going to start Saturday afternoons. Because at least it's like it's a weekend, which I like, and I'm not that old to where I can't I still have some of my night left after a Saturday afternoon game. And then I actually agree with Allan on the weeknight game being like a really good break up to the week. I was talking, I think after the game with a friend of the pod, Catherine at the Vineyard tailgate, who also works from home. And we were talking about just like the juxtaposition or like the difference between the like go out and work in the world crowd and the those of us who work from home. And I'm not going to complain because like I work from home, and I think if I complained about it, people would be very upset with me. However, like when I am at home all day, well, everybody else is coming home from work. I like cannot wait to go out into the world and do something because I've just been sitting here like talking to a computer all day. So I think the Wednesday night to sort of like break up the monotony of looking at the same four walls for me specifically is really helpful. So I'll bench the Wednesday night games because I don't want them in my starting 11. I don't want them happening all the time, but I do like what they can bring off the bench. I like every once in a while having a weeknight game.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I'd be very intrigued to hear other people's reasons for which of these they prefer. And maybe we can, but I guess the Ivy have done a good job of meeting people where they are because of the range of games that are happening for these various reasons at these different times. So we thank you, Ivy scheduling team. Your service is noticed and appreciated. Any last thoughts? We have cut another 10 minutes off our podcast time today. Give ourselves a huge round of applause. Thank you to the Ivy for such a not dull. I won't be that harsh.
Dull's harsh, yeah.
Non-specific match.
There it is.
Sure.
All right. And with that, please like, comment, share, subscribe, do all the things on River City 93, YouTube, Instagram, Blue Sky. I'm not on Blue Sky. I'm still on X, Twitter. Please come hang out with me there because I refuse to cede it to the Nazis. It was mine first, and I'll stay there until it's dead. So you can find me on there. Talking soccer against all odds. there's a fun little USL community on there. Any other social media platforms I'm missing? No?
Yep, think you hit them.
Okay, perfect. I do work in communications and marketing, so I hope I know my social media platforms. All right, and with that, Elliot's favorite sign off. Everybody, be easy, be safe, and we will catch up with you next week.